Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AAS YouTube channel. And this one is going down the Scientific Editor series. You get to meet your scientific editors. And I am super happy to have Steinn Sigurðsson with us today. Hey, Steinn.
Hey, good morning. A lovely snowy day today.
It is a lovely cold day on this January 25th of January in Phoenix. We hit a little freezing last night.
Nice.
Got a little rattly, but it's probably a bit colder and a bit snowier where you are at.
Actually, it's only barely freezing, but we're getting a good bit of snow, and I'm a bit uncamped because I just came in from a quick walk with the dog in the snow.
Oh, very good. So the campus is closed today or something?
The campus is closed, yeah, unusually enough. That's a rare occurrence at this end.
Yeah, you think
may have trusted the weatherman a bit too much, but you know.
Well, it's good. I got you for a whole 25 minutes here, so it's all.
I'm all yours.
Very good. Okay. So let's start off. What do you like to do for research, Steinn?
Ooh, well, everything.
Okay. Can we narrow that down just a little bit?
Well, broadly sort of astrophysicsy thing. And so my background's physics. And I sort of drifted accidentally into the astrophysics direction. Astrophysics is data. It's actually really nice if you're a theorist to test your conjectures against reality and be crushed. Reality is very
more than once.
Yeah, but broadly speaking, I do compact objects and more gravity and less radiation.
There you go.
I completely by accident fell into the computational side of things. So my approach is generally nowadays to throw computing power at it, or actually grab a grad student and tell them to go play with this. I'll nudge them in gentle directions as needed.
Very good.
Yeah, I worked on almost all scales, from actually sub-solar system meteorites in solar system up to universe. I was I've done cosmological simulations too, and almost everything in between. But my primary focus is black holes and stuff.
Cool.
And preferably black holes interacting with other things. So that's
black holes.
Black holes are really good, and
yeah, especially these days.
Yeah,
they're rolling. And I'll spill a little something personal here, people. So I actually know Steinn for quite a while. I was a grad student when he was a postdoc, and so we go back more than 1 year.
Yeah, no, you were a senior grad student, and I was a first-year postdoc, California Observatory.
Yep, you were doing three-body, at least multiple-body interactions, ostensibly in globulars.
Yeah, pulsars and globulars, and that's also when I started thinking about black holes as compact binaries and the galaxies. We were doing serious. Well, actually, that's when the Grand Challenge Cosmology Consortium came together.
Oh yeah, okay.
Founding Challenge Cosmology Consortium.
Cool.
Good old days.
So I'm always kind of curious how people kind of get into the field. So, you mentioned you were doing physics and then you sort of turned to astrophysics. So what was the toggle point? What triggered that transition?
Oh, yeah. So I was in grad school and I was kind of dabbling. I was actually working in high energy theory. And I was visiting my undergraduate university and had lunch with John Barrow, who had taught me general relativity as an undergraduate. And we were chatting, and he was like, "You should be doing black holes." And I was like, "Okay." I mean, I like black holes. And I went back to Caltech, where I was a grad student, and I'd taken a class from Sturl Finney.
Oh, yeah.
On black holes. And kind of wandered into his office, and his student, and he likes to do a lot of different things. So that worked for me, and
cool.
Yep, and I ended up actually did several different research projects there, but my thesis ended up being on millisecond pulsars, binaries in particular, and it was a very hot topic back then. It still is. So
So was that your,
I may have frozen.
did that, no, you're good. You're good. We do have a little bandwidth issue, but it's generally okay. So on that millisecond pulsar work, did that actually turn into your first AAS Journal article, or was there one before that?
Actually,
Or
my first journal article was for a commercial publisher that shall not be named.
Mm-hmm.
It was a short and picturesque little paper. My first AppJ article was actually, this was when Alex Wolshan had just discovered a planet.
Okay.
And there had been that, and there had been a previous planet announcement that was withdrawn from Jodrell Bank Group about a pulsar planet.
Right, correct. Right.
I'd actually looked at, I'd been one of the groups of people who pounced on that to check it, and there was a flaw found in the data analysis. But then Alex came along, and there was an impromptu workshop announced. Basically summoning together people who touch this peripherally, talk about this new planet stuff. I mean, planets, who'd ever heard of planets?
Yeah.
And I got a call that said, come to our meeting. I was like, okay. I said, oh, and write something up.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, we're going to go back to planets and pulsars, because that worked for me.
Yeah.
And then I was like, and pulsars and globular clusters. So it's like planets in pulsars and globular clusters. That's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wrote that up. It became an AppJ letter.
Cool.
My first AppJ letter. It was a very nice little paper. I think so. I mean, not an objective person, but right next to me at the meeting, I put up a poster about this. Was Don Backer from Berkeley.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And Don kind of leaned over and looked at my poster, and I kind of leaned over and looked at his poster. And he said, you have to come over and look at this. And I had a prediction on my poster, like if there's a planet around the pulsar and the globular cluster, this is the timing anomaly you will see. Okay. And Don said, here's a pulsar and a globular cluster we've been monitoring, and it has this really weird timing anomaly. And we were like, okay.
All right. Let's chat.
So that became a series of papers. So it's actually, we're still monitoring. Don is no longer with us, unfortunately, but the pulsar is still being observed, and pulsars are astronomical objects. They live on their own time scales. So this planet, which was officially announced to be confirmed the planet about 10 years later, so 20 years ago, is still being, we want to see the closure of its orbit and follow up on it. So cool. That's how I ended up doing planets on the side. Yeah.
Quite a mix. Planets and pulsars.
It was fun. And so it led to a large number of AAS journal papers.
Absolutely. Yeah, we will put a link to Stein's first AAS Journal article in the description below the video. So yeah, then you've had quite an illustrious history as an author, publishing in the AAS Journals. And at some point, the opportunity to become a scientific editor arose. And I'm curious why people decide to become scientific editors. So what was your driving wheel at the time? And if that's changed, what is it now?
Well, peer pressure.
Okay.
A person who was already a scientific editor, actually, I was visiting them and in their office, and they were doing something, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm editing for the AAS Journals. And I looked at the setup, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And it's like, yeah, it's a lot of fun. And we talked a bit, and one of my things has always been that I like to stay current.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I obsessively followed the latest papers and tried to, I really tried to not get too narrow. It's like my peculiarity is I've been tempted into the, know more and more, but less and less. And I tried to I want to know the context. I want to know how this links to other stuff, and because it's been a productive way for me to think about stuff. So it's sort of a confirmation bias. It worked for me, so I should keep doing that. And I was like, if I were working as an editor, I'd see the papers as they come in, and I'd have to read them.
Yes, you do.
Yes. And somehow this was communicated over coffee. And a little bit later, I got a call from Ethan saying, we have a vacancy. Would you be interested? And I was like, yeah. So I popped up to Ethan was in Canada at the time and visited. And I don't know if it was an interview or an attempt to persuade me or what. I'm not quite sure about the details of machinations behind the scene, but I walked out as a new editor. And
very cool. So that would have been in 2009, 10, somewhere near
that time frame. Yeah, it was. I know I passed my 10th anniversary not that long ago.
Okay, very cool.
And yeah, it's nice. It's a commitment. It's as with all things in academia, the nominal commitment may not precisely match the actual commitment, but it's also you just have to do what you have to do. And
everything's 25%.
when your lead editor is flexible about working arrangements, as you know, sometimes then that helps too.
Indeed.
So sometimes it's like your turn to knuckle down, and then sometimes it's like, dude, I'm back off,
which I do just fine. It's perfectly great. Perfect. So is that still your motivation? Is that still one of your driving wheels, is to be on top of the literature as it rolls through?
Yeah. It does actually force me to be current. I mean, if you want to be perfectly cynical, I have kids in college, and every little bit helps. But it's also it plugs you into a different side of academia. And sort of as you move up from being on the ground, I mean, I don't have a lab, but there's sort of you spend your time at the desk doing the nitty-gritty stuff, and then at some point you have people for that. I used to be those people, so that's cool.
You understand it.
Yeah, but then you have to develop a perspective of the broader issues, how your work fits into what other people are doing, how it fits in where we're going.
Yes.
And I don't necessarily want to be in like society governance or determining future NASA missions, but I want to know where we are, and going up to society level gives you a different perspective, and it shows you the other side of the meetings.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm not just at a meeting to socialize and hear the latest talks. I'm now at a meeting to have other people be able to socialize and hear cool talks and stuff. It's
cool.
Somebody has to do it, and it's fun and interesting, and it kind of is not directly part of the job, but it surfaces you into that side of things, and then I take on some of those.
Good. Very cool. Very cool.
It's actually you meet a lot of authors.
You do meet a lot of authors. So since people may not know, what is it actually that a scientific editor does? So in a typical day, typical week, whatever it may be, what does a scientific editor do?
Well, so I have a dashboard in the AAS system, and I get pinged, and the pings are either, hey, there's a new paper come in, can you take it? And most of the time I'll say yes. I try to always say yes. Very occasionally I'm conflicted. Very occasionally I'm like, what is this thing? Actually, I don't think I've ever done that. And sometimes I have to say, look, I'm overwhelmed. And the workflow is complicated, although there's a primary lead editor who sort of feeds you. Any lead editor can say, hey, I need somebody outside my corridor.
Right.
We are in corridors, but you can cross over to the adjacent corridors. And then we have multiple journals. So I, for example, take my fair share of letters. So they have slightly clashing workflows, but crudely speaking, you get a paper and you look at it, and half the time you're like, oh, I know exactly what to do with this, and half the time you're like, oh, somebody's actually doing that. Okay. And if you know exactly what to do with it, I usually hop in quickly and say, okay, is this person available? You have to find the referee. So you look at the paper, you read it, and it's like, oh yeah, it's exactly what I think it is, because I work in the field, so I know a lot of the stuff already, and I know exactly who should referee it. And then, are they available? I ping them. some fraction of the time, and the fraction varies with seasons and global pandemics, warfare, that kind of stuff.
Indeed, it does.
Very much so nowadays. You ping them, and they're like, "Hey, you want to take this?" And if you're lucky, their answer will be, "Oh yeah, I already looked at this paper, and I'm going to be reading it, or I started reading it last night. I might as well referee it." And like, yes,
Cool, good.
that's the perfect scientific editor workflow. Is you know exactly who should referee it. They're already looking at the paper,
And there goes.
sometimes they're like, "Oh no, this is such a great paper. I already called the authors and said I want to collaborate with them."
Oh no.
Yeah, then it's like, okay, yeah, you're the right person, but how would you do that to me? And sometimes they're on the paper. That happens about once every 2 years.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so software is supposed to catch that, but it actually doesn't all the time. So
Particularly on a larger number of authors, I've noticed
yeah.
sometimes it doesn't pick everyone.
Sometimes with the collaborations, you don't
Yeah.
even see the full author list, and they're
Yeah.
dynamic. So sometimes, like, I email a postdoc and say,
Okay.
"Hey, it's in your field," and they're like, "Oh, I just joined the collaboration last month. I'm conflicted." It's like, okay, at least you were the right person. So who of your friends hasn't joined the collaboration yet? Yeah. So and the papers that there are interesting papers that are on topics that I may not be intimately familiar with, but still need someone to do. There are more topics than there are editors. Is the quick way of looking at it.
Yes, there are.
Then I have to look at it more carefully and think about it more carefully, and then you sometimes the authors make recommendations for referees. Sometimes, which is a good thing, by the way. Authors should generally think of people to recommend as referees, not necessarily because we're going to choose them,
Right.
because it tells us where we should be looking.
Right. It's often a lead into a field.
Yes. It's like, okay, that group of people are the people who do this. Now I know where to begin.
Yeah.
Then I have various tricks for trying to figure out who to ask. Sometimes that's cold calling. People who've never heard of me, and until that morning I'd never heard of them. Suddenly get an email from me saying,
cold call.
Yeah. And some of the time, actually, one of the neat tricks that I have is I find someone I know is absolutely positively not going to be able to referee it, but they'll be able to tell me who will.
Yes. Yes, that's always very valuable.
And those are usually more senior people who get asked too much to be referees. And most of them know, sometimes they take the paper themselves. They're like, yeah, it's my turn now. But a lot of the time they're like, yeah, I know what you're asking, and you should ask one of these three people. And then I have a lead. I don't necessarily take their advice either. I may just have that's a lead. But you find someone who is in the field, who is active in that subfield, and therefore they know, and then you pull on the thread on that.
Cool.
So then hopefully you get a referee's report back.
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
Sometimes people vanish. I empathize. Yes. I'm sorry to say I've done that to people. Life events take over, and you thought you were going to be able to do it, and then you got to say, "I'm sorry, I just can't get to this." Yeah, life happens, especially in the last 2 years. Things got very difficult during COVID for a while because
yes, it did.
It did get very difficult. They're still saying, I still think we're still not out of it.
No, I just had a referee last week who sent a message from the hospital, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, and a couple of times you get a message from their estate.
That has happened. I have had referees cease way through a process.
Yep, that's
yep,
that's hard. But you get the referee report. You read the referee report.
Okay, good.
Sometimes it has to be cleansed.
Yes.
Or rephrased.
Yes.
Or very occasionally, you can't say that. Go back and try again. That's very
right. So in general, we want to be reviewing the research and not the researcher.
Then you send the referee. Yeah. Or yes, I know you would have not done it this way, but that's not your job.
It's not your paper.
Take the paper as it is, not the way
you would have read it.
It's not your paper.
Right.
Also, very occasionally, referees go off piste and call up the author, trying to be helpful.
Yikes.
That is an absolutely big no-no.
Yikes.
If you're even thinking about doing that, talk to your editor, and 99.9% of the time, the editor will be like, no, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Sometimes it's like, yeah, okay, I get it. You have my blessing, and on you. By the way, those things usually go, well, not usually, those things frequently enough end up really badly that there's a reason they're discovered. It's not just control things.
Right.
And then you send the referee report to the author.
Okay.
And most of the time, the authors are, thank you for your really nice report. And we've done all the things you asked and some other things. And maybe a couple of times they're like pushing it back a bit. Yeah. And that's sort of the ideal way it happens.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Sometimes the authors are not happy about being told they're wrong. It's nothing personal. It's how science works. You make corrections. There are sometimes cultural differences. There are both within subfields and within people cultures, different ways of expressing your concern about the adequacy of particular aspects of research. So that sometimes needs to be managed.
Yes.
It's like when they said that, they didn't mean it that way, kind of thing. Don't take it personally. It's just a, yeah. Good that can sometimes get interesting too. But hopefully most of the time the authors take the report, and actually we have a very good culture of constructive reports. There are academic subfields where like referee report is, this is trash, rejected. And then particularly with the AAS journals, but astronomy in general, the culture is sometimes it's yay awesome. I'd say one paper in less than 100 and more than 1 in 1,000.
Yeah.
The referee reports is just like, this is fine, just publish it as is.
Yeah. About
half the time I look at it, it's like, yeah, I agree. And half the time I'm like, what about this thing? Or maybe I should check with someone else. Sometimes when you get a referee report, do you want to go to a second referee? Sometimes you want to go to a second referee from start.
Yes, sometimes.
Sometimes that's because the paper is machine learning of limericks about the stars, and you need 3 referees. You need like a machine learning person, a stellar person, and a poet.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, nothing personal. Just sometimes the referee says, love this paper, but they're in the middle, they're talking about how the blobbity graph does the ellipticization, and I don't know what that is. So find when you talk to someone who knows about that to check if they actually did that right. I totally sympathize with that because I'd never heard of a blobbity graph either.
I've done that many times.
Yeah. Then usually I'd say there are on average 2 iterations. A referee wants to see the paper again, referee looks at the paper again. Sometimes like, great, I recommend you publish. Sometimes they're like, you didn't really quite answer that question, or did you mean that? Or now that you said that, I've thought of something else. That's totally legit, by the way. It's totally a process.
Yep.
It's rare to go more than 3 iterations, but it has gone further.
It does happen.
Sometimes you're like, okay, irreconcilable differences, we'll send it to mediation and find somebody else. Thank you for your services, or I want 2 reports now, or all of this, by the way, stretches things out. There's no helping that. There's also an important part of the process. The referees, please note this, that I decide if the paper is accepted or rejected. The referee does not.
Correct.
Yes, and that is an important root principle. And it is not entirely appropriate for a referee to say, I accept this paper. Referee says, I recommend this paper be accepted.
There you go.
And just social niceties. I know what you mean, but yeah.
Right.
Keep in mind there's a process. Anyway, and this is all a nice process. Then the paper goes to production after being accepted, or very occasionally, 10% of the time, 20% of the time, that order is like, sorry, try another journal, or we just think this is wrong, or if it's at the no, this isn't even astronomy, that's usually been caught before we go through this whole process.
That usually gets
not always
hampered.
So sometimes it's just like, sometimes it's like, we're not sure if this is even on topic, but let's ask someone.
Okay, right.
It's rare, but it happens. I mean, astronomy covers a lot of bases, and we touch on a lot of things. So there are interdisciplinary things, biology or astronomy,
Yeah.
physics or astronomy. So it's not that.
Yep.
So, and that's actually fun, but it can be really time consuming. Every now and then, things get stuck. We're actually overall pretty good about doing things quickly. I think we have but there's always a long tail. Long tails can happen for reasons. Occasionally you realize there's a problem and you have to shortcut it, but if you have to interrupt the process, it means you have to start again.
Yes.
And something that's already taken a long time has a high probability of taking a long time again.
Yes.
Really sorry, authors, but yeah, unless you're really unlucky. I mean, things happen to referees too. And actually editors too. But apologies, by the way, but sometimes if I'm not responsive, it's actually because this is a very part-time thing, and
all good.
The editors have lives too.
All good.
Professional and personal.
Yeah. We do. We have a lot.
And then, well, we like to pretend we do. Anyway.
Very good.
We don't talk about how often we email at 2 in the morning. 2 in the morning, Arizona time, by the way, Frank. Thank you.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
It's not the problem. Is not that you send me email at 2 in the morning, Arizona time. The problem.
Well, I hear the stars come out at night. Yeah. So, out taking a look.
I'm a theorist, please. I saw stars once. No, I'm joking. Cool. Yes.
Well, that was a great summary of sort of what a scientific editor does on various points. That was very good.
Oh, thank you. I thrift that.
Good. I'll hire you. You're great.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, actually, I'm under contract, but when it comes up again, we can talk.
Well, we'll have to lock you in for a while. So very good. Let me just drill down a little bit on a couple of points. Manuscript comes in, and what do you think makes for a good, solid initial submission? What are you looking for when it comes in? Okay, this is a good one, or okay, this one's going to take some time. So what do you look for a good initial submission?
Well, the same thing I look for when I'm reading a paper. You look at the title, glance at the abstract. Sometimes you pause and look a little more closely at the abstract, and either go like, "Whoa, I got to read this," or you go, "What are you doing?" You look at the authors, unless they're blinded. Actually, they're not. No, the authors are never anonymous to me, because otherwise I'll end up sending.
Because you wouldn't know who to. You may ask one of them to review their own paper.
Exactly. Yeah. So we always see the author list, although we can send out manuscripts with the authors masked out to the referees as an opt-in. And then, I mean, I work in the field. A lot of the time I will know who the authors are. Sometimes I don't actually know them. Sometimes I know them by reputation, or I've seen papers on them before. And then you have context, and context is important. It's also a bias, which is something we try to be conscious of. Then it's flick through the manuscript initially, just do the quick scan, the same as you do when you're reading a paper. What are the figures? Is something out of place? Is the bibliography reasonable and complete? Is it structured? That really, really basic stuff. And then it's really, when I teach students scientific writing, I always get the how long is it supposed to be? And I'm like, you're not in high school. It's not 6 sentences and 3 paragraphs, please. You start writing, and you write what you want to tell people, and when you're done, you stop. And if it's really short, maybe you didn't explain yourself well enough, although sometimes you did. There are famous ultra short papers that are excellent.
Indeed. And
if you find yourself you're writing a book, maybe you're over elaborating, although sometimes 100-page papers are necessary, and you just go. There are 100-page papers. Right
There
now.
are, yes.
Yep. And no, doesn't make sense. What does it reach a conclusion? Is it science? Is it yeah, and then there are observational papers, there are theory papers, there are data analysis papers. They all have their own quality. Are you explaining the techniques well enough? It's kind of it's effectively a holistic view, and sometimes when I'm reading a paper, I get to a method section. It's like, yeah, I know how this works.
Right.
I don't necessarily do a level 3 read of method section and sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm like, you're trying to do what? That's hard. I want to know exactly how you did this. And sometimes a paper is being controversial, that they're being provocative, or they're contradicting an established thing. And it's like, oh, this is going to get interesting.
Yes.
And sometimes it's like, hey, we found 2 neutron stars merged together and emitted gravitational radiation.
Whoa.
And you're, oh, really? That's really interesting. I wonder if that's going to be accepted.
I don't know.
It's a strong claim. You better proof for that. And sometimes, and to be honest, the majority of papers are what I think was bread and butter papers.
Yeah.
They are the next incremental long ongoing process.
Yes.
And you want to see some more data, refined techniques, bigger sample, new sample, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a new way of thinking about old stuff. And I am actually a big fan of replicability.
Okay.
If somebody's doing something's been done already, but differently, they get the same answer. That's a big deal.
It's okay.
If somebody's done something using a particular technique, yeah, and you have a different technique, that's good. You do things you do things in 2 different ways. I like that. That's like, yeah, do that.
Science 101.
The referee doesn't always like it. Yeah, referees don't always like that. They forget that it's not just about doing completely new things. We're also supposed to be testing ourselves, and that sometimes it leads to interesting discussions. But yeah, and then there is impact. Yes, there's bread and butter science. There's long-term volume. Taking spectra of a lot of stars is important because it provides a baseline for the future. That's why we're going back 100 years and uploading old data so that we have synoptic data and stuff like that.
Right.
But there is a matter of impact, and some journals want to be more immediate, like the letters, for example.
Yep.
Yeah. Supplements, you have a load of high quality data that's not necessarily immediately applicable, but it has to be there for posterity with the analysis pipeline and 0th level reductions and all that stuff.
Supplements.
Yeah. Supplements.
Right.
So there's impact, but there's different kinds of impact. So then all of these is things you weigh. That's all interesting. And then you get the joy of having a paper accepted. That's almost as joyful for an editor as it is for an author.
Yay! I have 100.
And sometimes come back to you.
Celebrations a day. Cool.
You're exaggerating. I know how many papers you publish a year. So
there we go. Let's go to the other side. Let's go to let's drill in a little bit on referees. So do you have any tips for referees on what constitutes a good report, or tips for referees aside from the fact that they're not accepting the paper, but just sort of general guidelines for referees?
Yeah. First of all, go into it in a constructive mode.
Yes.
Think of it if you were a junior person writing a paper like that, even if the author is not a junior person, or the lead author or the corresponding author, how would you like the feedback? That kind of golden rule.
Wear the shoe. Right.
Yeah. If you think there's a genuine problem, you have to say, don't dance around it or try to protect people's feelings. But try to be, there seems to be a problem here. Have you thought of ways around that? Or may I suggest the possible approaches that might alleviate that?
Right.
If there's really
ways to do it.
Yeah. If you don't know, tell me. And if you really think it's a problem, suggest that we talk to someone else who might know, and preferably with recommendations. Because actually, you know, if this is they're using a blobbity graph, and I don't know what a blobbity graph is, but Joe does, or Sue over there knows. Then it's like, okay, I'll talk to them. And then, no, you don't talk to them, I talk to them. Or very occasionally I say, you know, you have my permission to go talk to them, because it's something confined. And they look at it and say, yeah, thank you for letting me see that. It's cool. Or, oh no, you can't do that to the blobbity graph. I really don't want to build a blobbity graph.
Blobbity graphs.
One of the things I find more with first-time referees or very junior referees, just because of lack of experience, is they try to be too helpful. Yeah, I think that's actually a bit dangerous, and that verges into the how I would have written the paper.
Right.
And sometimes the referees are too focused on what, from their perspective, is the new best thing. And they forget that there are different ways of doing stuff. I certainly get that in theory papers. I literally had a referee come say, oh, you know, there's this new thing, you know, they're only looking at the case A and case B, but there's new case C, and they haven't considered that, and the paper is just like completely out of date. And a couple of times I've been like, you know, I work in this field and I've never heard of case C. What are you talking about? They're like, oh, well, there was a talk at a conference and it's not published yet, but preliminary indications. It's like, you can't do that.
Right.
The other thing you can't do is you can't ask people to reference things that come out after the paper is submitted.
Right.
Especially in rapidly moving fields, if you know, the paper was submitted 10 days ago and something came out 3 days ago, you can ask them, can you go back and take a look at this and see if it's relevant?
Sure.
Oh, they aren't aware of the it's you know,
it's a suggestion.
Calm down.
Recommendation.
Yeah. Yeah. So and sometimes and it happens, referees send in a referee report even though they don't actually have time to referee the paper. So they kind of phone in.
Phone them in.
Sort of tell. And sometimes it's like, yeah, okay. I mean, I read the paper too. And those tend to be papers that are fine.
Yeah.
Although sometimes you should just say, look, I couldn't get to this paper and I can't do a proper report. So, and that's okay too.
Or can I have another week or 2 weeks? And then just
ask.
Ask.
Oh yeah. No, that's actually asking for an extension.
Perfectly fine.
I will 99.99% of the time go, absolutely no problem.
Absolutely.
So
cool.
but just remember, other people are people too. They're not little student robots generating papers by command. They've thrown their soul into this usually.
Well, we won't go down the Chat GPT era because we are still figuring that one out, I think, as we go forward.
I spent a lot of my time on that. And, it's the thin end of the wedge, the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, we're living interesting times on their own.
Indeed. Yeah, it'll be very interesting going forward on chatbot wars. Yep.
Yeah.
But if you have any pride, write your own paper, people.
And turn off the spelling corrector
and put your science out there. Don't rely on some robot to do it. Geez. So
tools have to be used carefully.
Indeed. They do. Definitely.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, last question. Is there anything else you'd like to share with people about the peer review process or any aspect thereof?
Well, you know, come to AAS meeting, folks, and come to the AAS booth and chat with us.
Indeed.
We are people too. And we usually have little bowls of candy and cute swag.
And it's one of the reasons why we do these scientific editor videos, is so you get to meet the person and see them and see how they go. It's not just a line in an email or something like that. Yeah, here I am. So yeah, I will second that. Come to the AAS meetings. We are generally at the booth, or some fraction of us are in the booth. There's 23 of us or something like that, and not everybody can make it.
Half of us are usually there, at least.
But we are there, and you can come and chat and of course, I'd rather not have on the exhibit floor a very long discussion of why the referee report was right there on the floor.
Yeah,
but generally that does still happen. But
sometimes
generally,
you can step aside and have a little chat about things. But
yeah, we're real.
Yeah, cool.
Very cool. Steinn, thank you so much for taking some time on this snowy winter day in Pennsylvania to talk about your scientific editor activities. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope to see you soon at a meeting.
You shall, I'm sure. We will probably see each other in March. We'll see each other in March probably. So we do these, we do annual scientific editor meetings. We get together, we make sure we have a somewhat uniform culture as we go through, that we are all more or less playing from the same playing book. And so we'll be seeing each other in March. But that'll do.
Our mutual therapy session.
Ah, yes.
Don't talk about the mutual therapy session.
That'll do, everyone.
All right.
And I hope this made your astronomy day just a little bit better, and we will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Thank you.